Thank you for listening to Radio Free Idlewild, the official music and podcast station for Idlewild, California, the San Jacinto Mountains, and beyond.
Since its opening in 2015, Faro Restaurant has been one of Idlewild's leading restaurants, applauded for both its gracious service and casual take on fine dining. Nestled in the heart of the beautiful alpine village of Idlewild, California, Faro is more than just great food and elegant surroundings. It's a treasure destination not to be missed. Faro Restaurant, an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema. It's Italian, elevated.
The Riverside County Film Commission and the Riverside County Economic Development Agency are proud to sponsor the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema. With a region of over 7,300 square miles, the Riverside County Film Commission works closely with all 28 cities located within its borders, as well as state and federal agencies, to help streamline your production and ensure its success, assisting with everything from permitting in all jurisdictions to finding just the right locations for your shoot and many other production necessities. Riverside County, the perfect fit for your next film production.
Born out of creativity and desire, the Peak Restaurant and Bar at Tahquitz Pines is a must-see experience for anyone visiting the beautiful alpine village of Idlewild, California. Featuring a mix of local and international cuisine, the Peak Restaurant and Bar is the centerpiece of the Tahquitz Resort. Set amid gorgeous mountain surroundings and miles of hiking trails, the Peak is unlike any other eatery around. And, as an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, the Peak is home of the event's famous Filmmakers Village every year. The Peak Restaurant at Tahquitz Pines Retreat. Come dine with us.
You're listening to The Stephen Savage Show on Radio Free Idlewild. And now, here's your host, film and television director, Stephen Savage.
Thank you, Nikki. How's it going, everyone? Savage here with you for a very special episode of The Stephen Savage Show, the official podcast of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema. Podcasting as always from Cranium Wheel Studios at Chateau Esteban in the beautiful alpine village of Idlewild, California. Just a couple hours drive east of Los Angeles, but a world away at nearly 6,000 feet, high atop majestic Mount San Jacinto and overlooking the great Coachella Valley. And today I'm introducing our listeners to another of the 3 podcasts that I produce. This is a true crime history podcast called Fatal Gothic, where my co-host, actress Julia Parker, and I present stories of pre-20th century serial killers and murders with a cinematic flair, sort of an old-time radio drama, like what would have been available on the air in the 1930s and 40s. And I'm posting this on the Stephen Savage Show as a way of gauging whether or not we will produce more of these in the future and continue with that show and try to monetize it if possible. It is a very time-consuming and expensive podcast to produce, and we just want to put a few of these out there for our audience to perhaps give us an idea of if it's worth continuing with. There are quite a few of these shows available over on Spotify right now, so you can go over and listen to more if you like. But I'm putting it out here to see if we can garner any interest in it before we move forward. But before we dive in, we'd like to give a shout out, as always, to the Idlewild Film Festival's official lodging sponsor, Tahquitz Pines Retreat, Idlewild's premier venue for weddings, family reunions, romantic getaways, and just about any large or small gathering or event. So if you're coming to Idlewild for a spring or summer getaway, be sure to book your lodging at Tahquitz Pines Retreat, and you can check them out at tahquitzpines.com. That's TAHQUITZ, tahquitzpines.com. Okay, here's an episode of the true crime history podcast Fatal Gothic, and this is an episode entitled Louise Clapp and the Gold Rush Murders. and it covers a case from San Francisco in 1850, which was reported on in the only newspaper in San Francisco at the time by the only female crime reporter on the West Coast in 1850, a journalist by the name of Louise Clapp. And after listening to the episode, please feel free to do a little research on her online, and I think you'll find her entire life story quite fascinating, as our team did when we were researching the story. And one last thing, the story is pretty graphic, so I guess not made for children under probably 13, 14. So just so you know that. So without further ado, here is the Fatal Gothic podcast episode, Louise Clapp and the Gold Rush Murders. Enjoy.
This is Fatal Gothic. Case histories of pre-20th century serial killers, long hidden in the dark corners of time. Serial killer. A term coined by FBI agents in the 1970s to describe one who kills randomly, kills strangers, over a period of weeks or months or even years. But serial murder was not a 20th century phenomenon alone. Far back in the annals of time, before Jack the Ripper or H.H. Holmes, every country throughout recorded history has experienced the horror of senseless murder perpetrated by a killer without a face. My co-host for the podcast is film and television director Stephen Savage.
And my co-host is actress, voiceover artist, and television personality, Julia Parker. Taisto Koski's body was found frozen solid on the banks of the American River in late January 1850. He was discovered by a troop of soldiers of the California Bear Flag Brigade, led by none other than the mountain man and Indian fighter, Kit Carson. At first it appeared that Taisto had been attacked by a grizzly bear, then still very common in the Sierra Nevada mountains. But upon closer examination by the brigade surgeon, a Lieutenant Sanderson, and after a short period of thaw time, it was determined the Finn had been killed by a number of thrusts from a long-bladed knife, the death wound most likely the one which cut deep across his throat. In his pocket was a letter from Finland, from the dead man's sister, Anna, obviously a reply to an earlier letter Taisto had sent to her, saying he'd made his fortune in the nearly 1 year since he had left home to try his luck in the California gold rush. It seems he was planning to make his way to San Francisco, get a correct assay on his gold nuggets and dust, and book passage home on the first ship headed to Europe. But there was no gold fortune on his person, and no horse or mule to carry such a fortune if there had been. There were tools of the trade scattered about, a placer cradle, pickaxe, gold pans, etc., but no sign of gold. The man was given a Christian burial, and his sparse belongings, along with the letter from Anna, were kept in Sanderson's pack until the brigade reached San Francisco. Sanderson wrote in his diary that he'd composed a letter to Anna explaining what had happened to Taisto, assuring her that her brother was buried with as much propriety as could be expected in the wilderness, and sent both the letter and the few contents found on the dead man's person back to Anna. Sanderson would, in a dozen years' time, become a colonel in the Union Army during the Civil War. He was killed at Gettysburg in July of 1863, but his diaries, containing reports of events throughout his career, are still available to view in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. If not for these, the very existence of Taisto Koski would be lost to the winds of time. Sanderson wrote that Taisto was obviously murdered for his gold, and the brutality of the attack was more than likely due to the big Finns fighting back. Sanderson believed there must have been at least 2 men who brought Taisto down. No one man could be brutal enough to propagate such a monstrous endeavor. This was the last entry in Sanderson's diaries regarding the death of Taisto Koski. The surgeon had no way of knowing just how right he was, or just how many more murders of gold panners, as well as travelers and their innocent wives and children, would soon be turning up dead on the lonely roads between Sacramento and San Francisco. It would take a brave woman from the East, a school teacher and part-time newspaper reporter, to bring to light for the public the reality of the situation at hand. Taisto was only the first of many, many murders to come.
Louise Clapp came to San Francisco in 1850, the year California was granted statehood by the U.S. government, which took the entirety of the state as a reparation after the short but bloody war with Mexico. San Francisco had already been a growing settlement since the 1830s, but now, as miners rolled in by the thousands from all over the world, the former Spanish mission was blossoming into a city of much promise, and Louise, along with her husband Fayette, landed right in the middle of it all. Fayette had been saddled with less than perfect health for a while at this point, and the long, rough sea voyage from Massachusetts to California, around the unpredictable Cape Horn, did little to ease his distress. He was a doctor, but according to Louise, he was a terrible patient, and his illness upon arrival made it imperative that Louise seek out work immediately. She'd been educated in metaphysics and mathematics at the Amherst Academy, and always knew she could rely on teaching positions, if necessary, to support herself. She found just such a position in one of the outlying camps, where many miners' children were in dire need of proper education. But the squalor of these camps was not to her liking, and soon Louise was on the lookout for something within San Francisco itself. Miner Cam Chin Ho, his wife May, and their 2-year-old little girl were found murdered in their travel tent on the morning of March 7, 1850, on the road from Sutter Creek to San Francisco. There were thousands of Chinese immigrants working gold claims throughout Northern California, but very few were very successful, Chin Ho being one of those few. His friends among the Chinese miners say that he'd hit a small but rich vein of gold on his small claim. He kept digging until the claim was played out. It was reported that he had dozens of bags of dust and rock tied to his 2-pack mules when he and his little family bade goodbye to his friends and headed down the trail towards San Francisco. There, his plan was to open up a grocery and steam laundry in the city where he and his wife hoped to make a new life. Unfortunately, they never made it. A group of 5 Catholic priests, traveling along the road on their way to the coast from Sacramento, came upon the murder scene and set about the burial of the family. One of the priests, Father Juan Rodrigo Andrio, wrote out a report on what his group had found, which he would later hand over to San Francisco area authorities. Luckily, as the report to authorities was lost in some point in time, Andrio had also made a copy of the report for his bishop, which is still available for viewing in the archives at Mission San Francisco Solano. The report reads as follows.
Before the sun was much risen over the black trees which lined that particular trail, my companions and I happened upon a small camp which seemed abandoned at first. A tent was standing, though partially collapsed on the back side, and there were strewn about what appeared to be personal belongings in the Oriental style. Blankets, a small travel desk, clothing. Not a great amount of items, but more than one might expect from a single traveler. At the broken side of the tent, we spotted the body of a Chinese man, about 25 years of age, lying on his back. It appeared the body had been there only a few hours, as the blood covering his person was fresh, and no hardening of the joints had yet occurred. He was the victim of perhaps a dozen stab wounds, including a severe slash across his throat. Brother Antonio gave out a gasp which caught our attention immediately. He had pulled open the tent's entry flap and witnessed a most grotesque sight. He stepped away and became sick, prompting me to look inside the tent myself. There, lying on a blanket of rough wool, was a young Chinese woman of no more than 18 years or so, and in her arms was a small girl child. The woman had died, it would seem, of a gross slash across her neck. The baby was stabbed at least a dozen times, and I dare say the mother's person had been violated sexually. Her clothing torn apart, exposing her bare flesh, top to bottom. Blood was evident everywhere, including smatterings upon the walls of the tent. This attack was so inhumane. At first, my companions and I believed it was a bear or perhaps wolves that had been the agents of this horror. But closer examination made obvious the fact that it was a human blade and not the claws of an animal which had created this unholy massacre. There were pack blankets nearby, though no livestock were present, and a ledger book written in the Asian script was lying near. I will turn this book over to the new United States authorities when we reach San Francisco, along with this report, which I hope may lead to the capture of whichever poor demented soul is responsible for this most disturbing event. In God's name, Padre Juan Rodrigo and Rio, March 7th, 1850.
News of the brutal slaying of Chin Ho and his wife and child quickly spread throughout the region after a handbill was circulated throughout the camps and in the city itself, seeking witnesses or others who might have information about the murders. No one seems to have connected the murder of the young family with the killing of poor Taistokoski only weeks before. There was only one daily paper in the region, the Alta California, and news traveled only at the pace of a fast horse, but rumor has a way of traveling at its own speed, and word of the murders reached the camp in which Louise Clapp was teaching the day after the murders of the family. Louise was bored to tears living in the mining camp, and missed her husband dreadfully. He was now living in a hotel under the care of a Mexican nurse in San Francisco, still weak and bedridden from his illness. Upon hearing of the murders, Louise dashed off letters to Fayette, her sister in Massachusetts, and to Robert B. Sample, the owner of the Alta California newspaper, via a regular horse messenger who traveled between the camps and the city, picking up and delivering correspondence to be mailed off whenever cargo ships were headed to families and friends on the East Coast, both sides anxious for news from the camps and from home. Louise's letter to Fayette simply read, "I'm coming to you within days, my husband. Always yours, Louise." The letter to the Alta California we will hear about in a moment. But it's the letter to her sister Molly, the first of what would become many over the coming months, which is the most detailed and offers up an excitement that flies off the pages even when read today. It began,
My dearest Molly, I pray my words find you well and happy, and in possession of my previous correspondence, which is sent upon our arrival in San Francisco. Though Fayette is still convalescing in the city, a word I use most liberally as city is much too grand a description for such a wind-ridden village, though it holds the closest prospect to becoming such anywhere in its proximity. I have been teaching a dozen children in a rather large mining camp 3 days' ride outside of San Francisco, and I'm out of my mind with restlessness here, missing my husband and in dire need of intellectual stimulation. I believe I may have found my salvation away from my present situation. Word has come down through the camps of the murder of an entire family of Chinese in a matter so brutal as to be kept from the ears of those of less hardy disposition. In this news, I find opportunity and a way to be with Fayette and earn enough money to support us until he is again capable of practicing his trade. Doctors are needed badly, and I am certain he will do well when able. In the meantime, I have sent an offer to the only daily news entity in San Francisco. I have informed its owner as to my experience writing for periodicals and magazines in Massachusetts and New York, and have offered to work the first week at no charge or obligation in order to prove my worth. I am certain he will agree, so certain that I have informed the camp of my intention to leave in the morning and travel to San Francisco, where I will call upon the paper's owner immediately. These murders have put to me the notion that a solid writer such as myself would be a welcome asset, as editions of the paper that come to us on a weekly basis prove to be less than optimal in writing style or originality. The prospect of writing a story such as the murder of an entire family, though morbid on its face, has me already anxious to put my natural curiosity and strong journalistic skills to work. I'm positive I can talk my way into a position, and will keep you informed as to how this plan takes shape.
Idlewild isn't just a scenic mountain town, it's a living gallery. The Art Alliance of Idlewild supports local artists, funds youth art programs, and hosts world-class events that turn our town into an art lover's destination. Become a member, attend an event, or donate to support the arts. Follow us on Instagram at Art Alliance of Idlewild, or visit artinidlewild.org and be part of our creative community.
Welcome to the world of New Spirit Vacation Homes, Idlewild's premier vacation home rental provider. Whether it be an escape from the heat, a visit to the snow, or for the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, we have the perfect vacation rental for you. New Spirit Vacation Homes is distinctive from any other vacation rental company, not only because our guests have the broadest choice of luxurious homes to choose from, but also because we ensure guests' expectations are met and they have the most enjoyable and fulfilling getaway. New Spirit Vacation Rentals, an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Film Festival. Find us at newspiritvacationhomes.com.
For over 70 years, the historic Rustic Theater and Entertainment Center in Idlewild, California, has been the home for movies and live events for all of the communities that encompass the San Jacinto mountain range. And as the forever home of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, the Rustic has played host to some of the greatest indie films from around the world, as well as blockbuster first-run movies and music and comedy events. And the Idlewild Festival has been proud to call the Rustic its home base since 2010. So, whether you're in Idlewild for the film festival, hiking or rock climbing, or just exploring the beautiful mountain village of Idlewild, California, make sure to add the Rustic Theater to your list of must-visit spots. For a beer or fine wine at the Rustic Tavern, a tasty meal from the snack bar, or just a great movie date or family night out, the Rustic Theater and Entertainment Center is the right choice in Idlewild. Pop in and say hello.
Louise's plan did pan out, with Mr. Simple taking her up on her offer upon her return to the city and assigning Louise the story of the murders of the Chin Ho family. Though the deaths of Chinese people was not seen as a top priority to the Alta California readers, if the theft of gold was the reason for the carnage, that was a very interesting story to anyone in the area. Gold was driving the economy of California now, and the safety of that gold, traveling between the camps and the city, was a concern among the population as a whole. Louise was to report on the dangers involved in the transport of gold, as well as to use her experience in the camps to cover a wider area of interests. Little did she know, she would spend much more time covering additional murders as she was writing general interest stories meant to give confidence to miners and gold speculators. And it would begin almost as soon as she was offered a full-time position with the Alta California. The story of the murders that would rock Northern California during the gold rush would be well covered over the next century in newspapers and magazines, as well as in historic books and novels. But in the spring and summer of 1850, the story was Louise Clapp's alone to cover, and she covered it well. So well that soon her reporting would be syndicated in papers in New York, Philadelphia, and Louise's hometown of Boston, as well as other large East Coast markets. She was gaining fame as a journalist. Unfortunately, as was the norm in that day, her stories were printed under an assumed man's name. Her work was celebrated, but under the vague nom de plume of L. Shirley. Louise didn't seem to care what name her stories were published under. She was making her living as a writer, her lifelong dream. It's through Louise's surviving articles, as well as her numerous letters to her sister Molly back in Massachusetts, that we get a full and concise view of the terror that swept through the region in the year of 1850. Her work is an invaluable resource, and we are grateful for her solid journalism and energy. But the effect of covering what would become known as the Gold Rush murders would have a lasting effect on her life, and would eventually cost her her marriage, and would at last make her question why she'd sought out a career that would put her life in danger and cut away at her artistic spirit. The corpse of a runaway slave, a miner named Owens, no first name is ever mentioned in Louise's coverage of the story, was discovered at the bottom of a shallow ravine off the same road where Chin Ho and his family were murdered. Two other miners, whose claims were near Owens in the Placerville area, along what was called the Golden Chain Trail, came upon the body on their way back from San Francisco, 1 week after the murder of the Chinese. A report of the killing was sent back to San Francisco authorities via one of the speedy horsemen who served as letter carriers. This report would lead to Louise's first full assignment for the Alta California. Rumor of the murder of Mr. Owens spread fast, but exact details were held back from the public by San Francisco's Special Police Force. Not a true police force, the San Francisco Police Department wouldn't become active until 1851, but rather a group of private citizens called specials, answering only to California Governor Peter Hardeman Burnett, and sworn to protect the citizens and merchants of the city. And from historic evidence, they took their task seriously and did a pretty good job, considering San Francisco was full of riffraff of every sort at that time. When Louise landed the position at the Alta, she did something any intelligent reporter does even today. She made connections with local cops. In this case, her connection was a young Special Patrol Lieutenant named O.W. Whitney, serious, handsome, as described by Louise to Molly, and very dedicated. Whitney, an Englishman who had come to San Francisco after living in British Columbia for a few years, was assigned to investigate the case of the murdered Owens, and invited Louise to make the trip with him to the Placerville Gold Camp, where she could interview the black man's friends and acquaintances and cover the story of Whitney's investigation. She didn't hesitate for a moment. Leaving the still ailing Fayette in the capable hands of his nurse, she hired a horse and followed Whitney into the wilderness. That day, she became a true crime journalist in every sense of the word.
Dearest Molly, I'm writing to you in the light of a campfire in a mining settlement called Placerville, 3 days' ride east of San Francisco. No, I'm not living here. I'm on assignment. Yes, I procured a position with the Alta California, San Francisco's only newspaper, and have been sent to report on the murder of a colored man who it is said had done well with a small mining claim nearby and was more than likely killed for his gold while traveling to the city to deposit it with one of the many private banking merchants there. It would seem strange to you, sister, as it did to me at first, but truth be told, the only prerequisite for operating a bank in San Francisco is ownership of a large safe. Archaic, to say the least, but the system has worked to everyone's satisfaction thus far. Proof by the fact that the murdered man was, according to those who knew him, taking his treasure to one of these ad hoc institutions for safekeeping before returning again to work his holdings. Remember when you and I would do our best to scare one another half to death as we'd sit in the light of our bedroom lantern reading spooky stories about phantoms and ghouls and the ghosts of European castles? Well, what I've been dispatched to report upon is something like that, only very real. Much, much too real. The man's name was Owens. He was a runaway slave from some, no doubt, horrendous plantation in one of those ungodly southern states, and had made his way to California hoping to earn enough gold from his hard labor to purchase his own wife and child, whom it said were sold off to another plantation, separating them by many miles. This story alone would be enough to bring tears to the eyes and anger to the heart, but to hear of the man's death before he was able to orchestrate his plan is only overshadowed by the beastly way he was murdered. It is disheartening, sister, to know that God allows such creatures as the perpetrator of this horrid crime to exist alongside men of goodwill and gentle nature, as Mr. Owens is reported to have been. Brace yourself for what I will write here, Molly, but I know if I were to leave out even the minutest of detail, you would only write back begging that I fill in the empty spaces. So here is what I have discovered thus far from the men who knew Owens best and are witness to the gross facts regarding his death. I will be as precise as possible, as I plan on utilizing what I write here as a draft for the article I will hand over to Mr. Semple.
Here, Louise lays out what she learned about the murder of Owens through interviews with the men in the Placerville camp, including information she picked up inadvertently surrounding the murder of the Chin Ho family. And it's on this trip that she first learns of the murder of Taisto Koski, the Finnish man whose body was discovered by the Bear Flag Battalion earlier in the year. She tells Molly in her campfire letter that Owens was discovered face down in a large creek not 10 miles from his claim. He'd been shot once in the shoulder and once through the back by what would have been a large musket ball, then stabbed over a dozen times in his torso and upper thighs, with the nastiest cut to his throat, a cut which nearly severed the man's head from his shoulders, where it remained attached only through the strength of muscle and arteries. Everyone Louise interviewed, over 20 miners in total, agreed that Owens must have been shot from his horse from a distance, Then, as he tried to run, was shot again, with the stabbing and decapitation occurring only after he was down and immobilized. He was a large man and a good fighter, the camp boxing champ, she learns, and he would have certainly put up a fight had he not been attacked first with rifle fire. It was estimated that he was carrying a sum of gold in both nuggets and dust, worth over $10,000, reported one of the miners. Over $300,000 in today's currency, a sum which would easily tempt one of low character to steal. But to murder, and in such a drastic fashion, it boggled the mind and shocked to the bone even the most hardened miner. One thing was repeated over and over again by the men in the camp. Owens had made the miner's biggest mistake. He'd bragged. He let it be known that he had struck well on his claim. Always keep quiet when you hit it rich. He'd been warned by his friends, who were, it seems, very happy for him in his good luck. But he failed to heed the warnings, and it seems to have led to his death. The article Louise handed in upon her return to San Francisco was printed on the front page of the March 17th edition of the Alta California newspaper. It became an instant sensation, mainly due to the fact that, in her article, Louise, or L. Shirley as her byline read, was the first to put together the theory that all of the murders happening over the past weeks on the road to San Francisco seemed to follow a pattern, and it was possible the same man or men were carrying out these killings. The brutality of the murders alone pointed toward this hypothesis. To the readers of the paper, it made perfect sense, but to the commander of the specials, Joseph Matthews, this was pure conjecture, hogwash. He called L. Shirley to police headquarters with the purpose of getting him to write a retraction. Imagine his surprise to see a petite woman with an air of confidence about her walk into the room. Later, he'd warned Mr. Simple there'd be consequences if he didn't stifle Louise's work and limit her column to sewing tips and recipes from now on. To his credit, and due to the fact that her report had resulted in the paper's biggest sales day in its history, 5,000 copies selling out in a matter of hours, and a forced reprint in an unprecedented second edition, well, Mr. Simple had no intention of silencing Louise Clapp. In fact, he wrote to the commander that he was ordering a continuation of the story to be printed once a week as a continued special interest piece. This only served to heighten the ire of Matthews. But Louise was on a cloud. People knew her, they knew her work, and she was doing something important with her life. She wrote to Molly the very next day, continuing a series of correspondence between she and her sister that would, years later, be published in book form under the title The Shirley Letters.
Dearest Molly, my article on these brutal murders went to print yesterday and was a huge success. My name, or at least my pen name, is now public knowledge, and I'm over the moon with excitement my work has generated. I was even called into the office of the commander of police, who seems to have taken exception to my reporting, possibly because I brought attention to aspects of the crimes that he'd rather be kept secret. I believe he made the connection between the murders about the same time I myself did, but for some reason he held it back from the public. He ordered my friend Lieutenant Whitney off the investigation and told me in no uncertain terms that I was to cease my coverage of the murders immediately. But I have the full support of my paper and Mr. Semple, and I don't need the commander's permission to follow up on my theory that these killings are the work of one or perhaps a few men at most. There's no coincidence here. My instincts here are correct, and I owe it to our readers to keep them informed as to what I uncover regarding these brutal events. I pray my reporting will make wise the miners and perhaps convince them to begin traveling in pairs or groups against these senseless and brutal murders. But the men working claims for gold are an independent group, and it's difficult to make them understand the seriousness of what's happening here. The reluctance of the police commander to acknowledge, even on the surface, what my article portends. The reason, I suspect, is a fear of frightening the miners and interrupting banking merchants within the city makes it unlikely we have seen the last of these monstrous attacks.
Louise barely had time to begin her extended series on the murders up to that point before she was headed back into the wild to cover yet another killing scene. This time, a family of settlers who had traveled over the Sierra Nevadas from Missouri in a covered wagon. They were headed for San Francisco on the California Trail, not to pan for gold, but to start a hardware business. They obviously had means, but not a penny was found on their bodies or in the wagon. The word was, they hadn't simply been murdered, the entire family of 6 had been butchered. Louise, anxious to get to the murder site, sent a note to the house Lieutenant Whitney shared with 2 other policemen, asking if he might recommend an escort for hire to accompany her. He replied that he would escort her himself, but she would have to meet him outside the city to keep his commander from knowing. He'd been assigned to investigate the murders just an hour before receiving her note. Once again, under cover of darkness, Louise and Lieutenant Whitney set out into the wilderness to investigate the murders. The Alta California, April 5, 1850 edition led off on page 1 with the story of the murdered settlers on the California Trail, with a byline by none other than L. Shirley, the city's now most popular reporter. It opened with multiple headlines, as was the custom of the day. Top headline, Innocent Family of 6 Murdered. Middle headline, Fiend on the Loose. And the bottom headline, Gold-Hungry Killers Strike Again. Louise's theory was now accepted fact. The murders were being committed by 1 or 2 men who targeted travelers with money or gold. The article warned that traveling without the protection of a group, or as in the case of the settlers, without armed companions alongside, was like asking to be set upon by bandits desperate for an easy take. The article then got into the details of the murders as relayed to Whitney and Louise by some Indian men of the Yukian tribe who were traveling behind the settlers, though keeping a good distance, not wanting any interaction with whites if they could avoid it. Louise investigated, along with Whitney, the wagon and the scattered belongings strewn about. The bodies had been collected up by the time the 2 arrived at the scene just before sunrise the day after they rode out. The Indian men had found a group of U.S. cavalry a dozen miles from the scene, and it was the soldiers who had taken charge of the corpses and led away the oxen and a horse. The family father, a man named Dixon, was shot once in the heart and once in the forehead while driving the oxen team that pulled the family's covered wagon. The oldest son, 12-year-old Zachariah, was shot through the head and fell from his horse, upon which he was trailing alongside. The mother, Hannah, was found on the ground 20 feet or so behind the wagon. Her throat had been cut, and from the tearing of her clothes she appeared to have been raped. The same fate was handed down to the oldest daughter, a 10-year-old whose name was not given in the article. 2 other young daughters were found dead in the wagon, multiple stab wounds to each of their bodies. The Yukian men had heard gunshots and climbed a tree-covered hill to see what was happening. By the time they got to a good vantage point, they were only able to witness the very end of the brutal attack. But they saw the 2 men who were responsible. The description of the crime scene is as far as the article goes, but Louise's letter to Molly holds a different accounting, one much more monstrous in its detail, and with a twist that would later lead to Louise's final article on the murders. Her letter is brutal, honest, and chilling. We pick it up about a paragraph in, after Louise gives a few personal details such as Fayette's finally growing stronger and her own desire to cover other aspects of San Francisco life. Here we can see how her work is starting to take a toll on her emotionally. The murder of the settler family and her viewing of the bodies at the army camp set up nearby the murder scene has obviously shaken her. Reporting on the murders was bad enough, but now to actually see the victims close up, Louise was beginning to regret her having ever signed up for the job and questioning her own sense of humanity at having been so excited to begin with.
The sight of that poor family, cut up and desecrated in such a beastly manner, I only pray you never have to witness anything as disconcerting as that, which will now live in my memory forever. I was shown to a tent by Major Carrington, the commanding officer leading the cavalry. The bodies were laid out on blankets in the dirt. They were covered head to toe with coats and other clothing gathered up from among their belongings. The major gave me permission to pull back this clothing and examine the bodies. Why I did so is beyond me, but I believe I was driven by a need to see for myself just how horrific these attacks truly were firsthand. To be able to write truthfully about such things, one must be brave against the demons of the soul, but the price for such truth may be the soul itself. The entry hole in Mr. Dixon's forehead was large in my mind, but the back of his head, which was completely gone, proved a sight almost beyond bearing and brought me near to retching. His chest was bloodied beyond measure from the ball which had entered his heart. His face was distorted and pale, and his eyes, still wide open, were black as coal. His wife, whom I viewed next, was just as hideous a sight as her husband. The major, standing behind me, said it was obvious that both she and her 10-year-old daughter had been raped, then their throats cut deeply with a large blade. The young son had suffered mortal gunshot wounds to his body and head, like his father. But, dear Molly, I believe it was the two smaller children that affected me the most. So tiny, like little dolls, both covered in blood from head to toe. I couldn't hold back the tears. I exited the tent quickly. Lieutenant Whitney was nearby, and I rushed into his arms. The major approached and said it might be wise for me to return to San Francisco and wait for the murders to be brought in. My eyes grew wide. Brought in? I asked. Yes, he said. The Indians' description of the two men who'd committed the murders had compelled the major to set 10 of his cavalrymen riding off in pursuit. They had captured the men as they made camp not 15 miles from their most recent carnage. It was clear the major believed these men likely responsible for the other attacks over the past 2 months or so. Lieutenant Whitney finished up taking his interview with the major. Then he and I rode back to San Francisco. I won't quit on this assignment, Molly, no matter what the toll to my emotional state. It's the least I can do for Mr. Semple, having believed in me. But I will never again subject myself to such torture as this story has been. I will dedicate myself to women's suffrage and crusades in support of orphan children. One can't truly help society through writing if that writing destroys the spirit. It has been a long road traveled in a very short time, and I'm happy to see the end of it. Write soon, dearest Molly. Your devoted sister, Louise.
Let us introduce you to Idlewild's premier boutique inn, Harvey House, an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, featuring premium amenities and luxurious accommodations amidst the backdrop of the majestic San Jacinto Mountains. Situated on the banks of tranquil Strawberry Creek, Harvey House offers our guests perfectly appointed accommodations in which to relax, unwind, and enjoy yourself in privacy and style. Our professionally designed property lends an atmosphere of comfort and repose unmatched just about anywhere, making your stay most memorable indeed. Harvey House, Idlewild, California. Find us at harveyhouseid.com.
Every small town has that one special spot, a place where strangers become friends and friends share great times together. Idlewild, California has just that spot, Terrence Place Pub and Gallery, where live music and good company create amazing memories. We feature fine wines along with international and domestic tap beers. Our vibe is welcoming, fun, and eclectic. Terrence Place Pub and Gallery is proud to be an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema. Come and experience the alpine charm of Terrence Place, located in the Village Lane in downtown Idlewild, California. We invite you to stop by and have a great time.
No small mountain village would be complete without its favorite local breakfast spot, and the Red Kettle restaurant in Idlewild, California is just that place. As Idlewild's premier downtown breakfast and lunch restaurant, the Red Kettle is exactly what you'd expect. Great food, friendly service, and quaint small town charm, the Red Kettle is the heart of Idlewild's village life. And as an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, all festival badge wearers are treated to a 10% discount on every order. The Red Kettle restaurant, Idlewild, California. Home-style cooking all year round.
Looking for great Mexican cuisine in Idlewild, California? Look no further than La Casita, Idlewild's #1 spot for authentic Mexican fare, serving up both traditional and north-of-the-border specialties. La Casita is also famous for its great beer and wine selection, and the best margaritas to be found anywhere. La Casita, an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Film Festival, and simply the best Mexican food around.
The murderers were brought into the city chained by the California militia, which had legal jurisdiction in matters of the civilian population, and were tasked with delivering the men to the newly formed Committee of Vigilance, which would try the case under the guidance of the governor. A huge crowd gathered near the city square when they were marched in. They were pelted with vegetables and fruit, and the mob pushed in so hard that the militia captain had to fire his pistol in the air to get them to hold back. Louise would later write, telling Molly she feared her writing had caused such furor to build up, and that, had there been a lynching, she felt she might herself have been responsible. The men were brothers, Samuel and Franklin Meeks, originally from Missouri. They confessed to all the murders: Ty Stokowski, the Chin Ho family, Mr. Owens, the Dixons, and 3 more earlier murders along the Golden Chain Trail that hadn't even been reported. The gold and coin found on their persons was in the neighborhood of $65,000, over $2 million in today's currency. The militia's appointed judge berated the men at trial, stating, "The true sin here is not so much greed, but bloodlust. You could have simply stopped killing after you'd earned fortune enough to satisfy the average man, but you continued in your madness, proving it was blood and not gold that you sought." He then sentenced them to hang. As she stated to Molly, Louise continued to cover the case for the Alta all through the trial, describing the murderers as looking unwashed and disheveled, but otherwise quite normal, not the monsters one might expect. She concluded that they could have been your neighbors or kindly older brothers, and the way Sam Meeks cried upon hearing the sentence of death, one might almost feel sorry for them. This was, of course, until she remembered the Dixon family laying in that army tent. Then her baser feelings surfaced, and she welcomed the chance to see them hang, which they did on April 30th, 1850. Molly covered the hanging in detail. It was the last article she would ever write for the Alta California newspaper.
June 7th, 1851. Dearest Molly, after having confessed to you that my marriage to Fayette was on very rocky ground, I must now report that I have left him for good. He is not a bad man, but we are just so unsuited to one another that I'm afraid a reconciliation is at this point impossible. The brief flirtation I experienced with the handsome and kind Lieutenant Whitney is over as well. I just couldn't bear to leave my husband thinking it was over romantic feelings I held for another. Those feelings are real, but I must make this choice based solely on practicality and the desire to pursue the writing career I have begun so earnestly here in San Francisco. Writing is who I am. It is the very essence of me, and I must pursue it. But I feel I can do it more successfully back in Massachusetts, or perhaps New York. My stories have been syndicated to such an extent in the East that my reputation will precede me nicely. I have sent off inquiries to many major newspapers and magazines, and believe that I will find gainful employment at my chosen craft before I set sail for home. My experience here has been life-changing, but now I must fulfill that change in my own way and under my own terms. I will send word of my imminent arrival once I've chosen the date of my departure, perhaps in 4 or 5 months' time. I long to see you, sister, so very urgently. I have been away long enough. Yours as always, Louise. P.S. I have decided I will never write under a man's name or another name than my own from now on. It took Louise a few years longer than expected to finally leave San Francisco. As she worked through her divorce from Fayette, she left writing for a time and returned to teaching, not in the camps this time, but in the city itself. She and Fayette had no children, but Louise did adopt one of her students, a girl named Genevieve Stebbins, who would herself grow up to become a celebrated author and actress. Even though Louise had put down her pen for a time, aside from her regular correspondence with Molly, the articles she had written surrounding the Gold Rush murders were still on everyone's minds, and the Alta California had reprinted them a few times for those who were recently arrived in San Francisco. Louise was still big news. She was eventually approached by a man named Ferdinand Ewer, who was starting a new magazine for the growing San Francisco upper class, and anticipating that the rich had just as much taste for crime reporting as anyone else, and it turned out even more so. He offered Louise a good sum of money if she would accept her own column in the magazine called The Pioneer, sharing the more personal aspects of her experiences during her days of murder reporting. But she was done writing about that. Ewer came up with a compromise that she was able to accept. He couldn't reprint her actual articles from the Alta, but she told him of her letters to Molly written during this time, and agreed to let him publish those as a series. They did offer up her more personal feelings and insights into the murders. Ewer jumped at the chance and printed them as a periodical entitled The Shirley Letters. Louise had become somewhat of a well-off, if not exactly rich lady, and finally returned to the East, where she once again picked up her chosen career, writing for various news services and magazines in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and more. The Shirley Letters, finally published as a book in the late 1850s, were a huge success and allowed her the means to spend her time doing public speaking and writing about women's rights and health issues, and following the path of an activist for women's suffrage worldwide. Her life was complete. Louise Clapp died in New Jersey in 1906 at the age of 87. She never again wrote about the murders she had reported on in 1850, and she never again wrote under any name but her own. This concludes Episode 2 of Fatal Gothic, The Gold Rush Murders. I'm Julia Parker.
And I'm Stephen Savage. Fatal Gothic is written and researched by myself and Julia Parker, and produced at Lunatopia Studios in Idlewild, California. The role of Padre Andrea was performed by actor Frank Jaramillo. Thank you for listening. And there you have it, a very special Fatal Gothic episode of the podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it and look forward to your feedback. I want to thank all of our regular listeners who keep our numbers up on all platforms, as well as the newer folks who are finding us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, wherever you find and download your favorite podcast. So for our executive producer Steve Tuma, engineer Maurice Sudo, and the entire Radio Free Idlewild team, thank you for listening in, and we will see you next time.
Sunny most of the time. Some days it's bound to rain, for we are loved. Yeah, we are loved.
At Pure Bean Coffee, Idlewild, California's premier boutique coffee house, our passion is roasting the highest quality coffee for the most discerning coffee lovers. Our beans are ethically sourced and hand-selected from the world's finest coffee regions. You will notice the enhanced flavor nuances and low acidity with your very first taste. And as a proud sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, it's our wish to make the best impression possible on filmmakers and attendees from around the globe. So whether it's your first cup in the morning, a midday pick-me-up, or an evening taste of excellence to top off your day, always remember, we at Pure Bean love coffee as much as our customers do.
Woodland Park Manor, one of Idlewild, California's best-known and beloved lodging destinations, is a rustic treat for the casual overnighter or vacation traveller. With its many unique rooms and cottages and that special hideaway feel, Woodland Park Manor gives new meaning to the word relaxation. Nestled among the tall pines and centuries-old oak trees, the manor says Idlewild the moment you enter the property. As a sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema since year one, all festival attendees are treated like family, because that's what you are to the proprietors. Woodland Park Manor, Idlewild, California. Book your room now and tell them you're coming for the festival. You will love it.
Idlewild, California is known for its many quaint shops, but none is more quaint or special than Charla Tea Company in downtown Idlewild. With a wide variety of regional, international, and exotic blends to choose from, Charla is more than just a tea shop. It's an experience for the soul. As an official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, Charla Tea Company offers a discount for all festival badge holders. And what film festival journey would be complete without just the right tea bag in your travel cup? Charla Tea Company, Idlewild, California. Experience it.
It's cool, it's hip, and it's where Idlewild goes for burgers, fries, sub sandwiches, ice cream, and more. Atomic Cow, downtown Idlewild, California. Official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema. Fast, fierce, and filmmaker friendly. Be there or be square. Atomic Cow.
Going for a hike and just want the best beef or vegan jerky on the planet before you hit the trail? Then Coyote Red's Idlewild, California is where your search comes to an end. We offer a variety of premier natural foods, including our world-famous House of Jerky brand, barbecue sauces, hot sauces, treats, sweets, and so much more. An official sponsor of the Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, we are located right downtown at the Fort, directly across from Idlewild Park. Coyote Red's is where your search for the best beef or vegan jerky on the planet comes to an end.